What's up everyone? Good Wednesday morning. Garrett here. Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about a widget inside of Flutter called the FutureBuilder. And it's a really interesting widget. I think it's kind of overlooked. I don't know if it's more of an advanced thing, but it's probably a little bit overlooked when people are first starting out, because when you're working with futures, you kind of just think, all right, let me add the future in, I'll get my async data, and then I'll be on my way. But the FutureBuilder is pretty special because what it allows us to do is essentially have a widget that can build itself based on the status of that future, right? And that's really, really cool because it kind of takes some of the heavy lifting out of this for us. And so we don't have to check the state ourselves. It just is going to do it for us, which is pretty awesome. So now that we know what it is, that begs the overall question, well, why use it, right? If it is a little bit more to set up, let's say, than just having some async function that runs in your init state and then kind of reacting or having that function or doing something later on. The question is, well, why use this? And it's really a simple answer, actually. It allows a really, really easy way for our UI to react to the status of data throughout our app. It doesn't have to be something going out to the internet and using an API. It can just be anything that's asynchronous within our application. And in the example that we're going to see today that I'm going to show you, I have the app that I've been working on, so we're just going to be working inside of that app instead of setting up something new. And inside of my app, because I store user data when the user authenticates through Facebook, I store that user data in a SQLite database within my application or on the device. I don't exactly know how the relationship there works, but we're going to be using that SQLite database to basically just say to query that database, get the user data, and then we can show some stuff on the screen. And that is asynchronous because you're kind of waiting for that, right? It's kind of a separate entity that you're waiting for. So let's start walking through some code. What we're going to do is we're going to have this future. We're going to first set up this FutureBuilder, and it's going to work. Everything will be fine. But then I'm going to draw your attention to a problem that will arise if you use it in a certain way. And then we're going to look at the documentation to see actually what is their exact recommendation for using it, because from what I've noticed in my own usage as well as looking on the internet, it's a little bit different than what other people have been doing. The recommended documentation thing, it's kind of confusing. It's a little vague. And so we're going to walk through that as well. So the first thing we're going to do here is I have this text thing here and it says preferences. Unfortunately, that's kind of small on the screen, but actually I will zoom in here as well. Okay, perfect. So I now have this, and if I say, hey, I don't know how easy it is to see, but this text on my app simulator, on the simulator here, does say, hey. We're going to be deleting this, and now what we're going to do is create our FutureBuilder. So we will have a FutureBuilder, and the FutureBuilder takes in two named arguments. The first one is the future itself. That makes sense. And the second one is the builder. We'll come back to that. Don't worry, we're going to have an error for right now. This, we're going to have DB provider, which is not something you'll be able to access. That's something that I have written inside of my app to access my database, so don't worry about that. But it can be whatever async thing you want. So for right now, if you have, let's say, some API that you are using, or if you know of an API that you can use, or if you have a project that has an API you can use, whatever it is, try it out with that and see how that works. But this basically is going to a database thing that I have that will essentially just get me the user from my database. And now inside of this builder, this is actually a callback function right here. And the callback function takes in two things. It takes in the context and it takes in the snapshot. And then inside there, that's going to cause an error. Don't worry about that. Inside there, what's going to happen is, you don't have to do this, but we're going to have a switch statement just so I can demonstrate that we are going to account for all the different states that this might have. And so we're going to be looking at the connection, that's not correct, the snapshot dot connection state. Okay, that is, also I need to spell this correctly. That's literally, exactly what it sounds like. What is going on with our future? What's the state of it, right? And this is kind of how we can react to what the state of it is. So if you're, well, you'll see in a sec. So here we'll have our first case, and this will be connection state dot none. Okay, and we will just return here and say, actually I didn't want to do that. We're going to return a text widget here, and we will say none. Simple enough. Now let's add another one in. There's going to be 4 of them, so we'll add in 4 here. This next one will be active, and this is actually just going to be fall through, because it's not active. I guess is technically the same as the next one that we're going to have, which is waiting. And there we will say waiting or active, or I should say maybe active and maybe waiting. That kind of makes sense. And then this last one, this is going to be done. And so this is just like it sounds. When everything is done, you should have the data then. And then we also want to, if you can see there's some blue squiggly lines here, those are telling me that it's supposed to return a type of text and it doesn't. And that's because this case, or this switch statement, all the cases are not, like, they haven't happened yet. They're not the default thing. We have to add something that will happen no matter what. We do that, and now we have this. And look at this actually, by the way. This now says done. Okay, so technically, this is it. We've actually now finished here, right? We have our future builder, and everything works. We have our future, so it's loading this, and it's saying when that's done, or build this, right? It's kind of like its own build method, sort of, in a way, right? There's a problem here, and I'll demonstrate that problem, because what happens if we don't just want text? Well, actually, even if we don't just want text, something is happening here that we don't want to happen. And let me actually just say default here. I can demonstrate this by adding a text field and having a controller of text editing controller, and then say text. And in here, I can say that this will be snapshot.data first name. That's because this is not spelled correctly. And now this works. This is interesting because if we notice, something happens here that we don't want. This. Do you see what's happening? I'm clicking into it because I want to type. The keyboard starts to come up, but then we really quickly, for a split second, have that active and maybe waiting thing that comes up. Well, what's happening? What's going on here? The problem is that the build method is being re-triggered. And that is one of the biggest issues that people have with the FutureBuilder when they're starting to use it. Because the documentation specifically says at the top, I'll bring it over real quick, it specifically says this line right here. It's actually the first one. It's just kind of confusing as to what it means if you're getting started with Flutter or even Dart like I am myself. The future must have been obtained earlier during the state init, state did update config, or state did change dependencies. It must not be created during the state build or stateless widget build method because, or in the constructor FutureBuilder, if it's created at the same time, then basically every time the FutureBuilder's parent is rebuilt, so too will the asynchronous task be restarted. So what's happening is that our build method will actually start up here. The container is being rebuilt because the build method is being rerun. And that means that this is happening every single time. Our future is being executed every single time. And we don't want that, obviously. That's definitely not what we want. And that's why this is happening. That's why we can't type, because it's basically rerunning it again. And actually, one of the triggers for a build method rerunning, or for the build method rerunning, is the keyboard coming up. And I guess the user interacting with the screen to some extent. So how do we fix this? No problem. We have to change this actually though to a stateful widget though. And the reason is because we need state, because we're now going to use the init state method to trigger our future. So to do that, I'm actually going to probably cut ahead in the video. So we should be good now. Nothing's changed though. We still have this problem here. And we weren't going to fix that just then and there. But what we will do is we will fix that here. What we're going to do is we are going to create this new, actually this user future, we'll call it, and this is going to be of type future. The next thing we're going to do is have an init state thing here, an init function. We're going to override that. Actually, yeah, we're going to put it there. And then we will also have this get user method, right? Inside here, we're going to return. This is going to be async. So we'll have return await and then db provider db get user. That might look familiar, and it should, because we basically used it right here, right? And so then what we're going to do is inside of our init state, this is where we're actually going to run this function. And so we will have user future equal to get user. Then that means that this was just executed. So this right here is what we have. So we actually don't need that, right? So we're going to say user future. Now, if we refresh this, we'll come back into the app, we'll start all over, no big deal. It loads, we come in, we go back to our preferences page, and look at what happens. I click in here, and it doesn't refresh anything. It works the way that it should, the way that we want it to, and I can even type, do whatever I want. Now this is going to go back to normal because we don't actually change the data. We're always displaying the same thing, so you would want to not have this set to that. You'd want to have it set to like another copy of that data that you can mutate. But in this case, that's how you use the FutureBuilder. This is the correct way to use it. And the interesting thing here that I want to explain is, why does this work? Why does the other thing not work? Well, there's two things here, in my opinion, the way that I see it, that kind of helped it to click for me. Number one is the fact that the actual future is being executed here. Okay? That's the actual execution, not inside of our FutureBuilder. If it was inside of our FutureBuilder, then every time that the build method would run, so too would run that future. Instead, we're running it inside of an init state, and we're just passing it. We're passing the result of that future to our FutureBuilder. The other thing has to do with type. And Dart is a statically typed language. And if you're coming from the JavaScript world, this can be a little confusing, as it was definitely confusing for me, and quite frankly, still is in some ways. But what's happening here is that we're not actually passing a future, we're passing the result of the future, but that result is of type future. And that's a very key distinction to make. The documentation, in my opinion, doesn't really do a good job of explaining this, but essentially what the FutureBuilder is supposed to be passed is a piece of data that is of type future and not the future itself. They're two different things. And if you were to look at this user future thing, it would still be the object of, well, in my case, it's an object that I'm getting back. But it's not necessarily a type map, which would be an object. It's a future that eventually you'll have to convert, let's say, into type map or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that's a very, very important thing to understand, is the difference between an actual future and a piece of data that is of type future. And to me, for me at least, that was a really big clicking point when I realized that. And probably I think that understanding will definitely help when learning Flutter and Dart in the future. See what I did there? Okay, so thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please thumbs up the video. It helps out my channel a lot. If you want to know, let me know how I did. Maybe I sucked. Maybe the video was great. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to see more videos like these, then definitely hit that subscribe button. But also, hit the bell button so that you really get a notification every time I come out with a new video. All right, guys. Thanks so much. See you in the next one. Take care. Peace.